Hello, learning friends out on the internet. My name is Keith Hughes. You guys might know me if you're on my channel, but Sami Jarroush from US 101 had a really great idea. Hello, learning friends out on the internet. Now I have. My name is Keith Hughes. Nice one, Hughes.
That's why you got to kill that volume, kid.
I got it. The YouTube works. All right, let me hand it over to Sami so he can moderate and really talk and introduce us to kind of what we're going to be talking about regarding the NFL controversy. Sami and
Keith.
Tom.
Keith, thank you, my friend. Hey, guys, what's going on? My name is Sami Jarroush, the host of US 101, a weekly show that discusses American history and in some cases ties it to the headlines of current day. And we try to bring a historical discussion thereabouts. And yeah, like Keith said, I had this idea earlier this morning. I wanted to have a discussion with Mr. Hughes, and I also wanted to invite Tom RIchey, a person who I've not worked with in the past, I've not collaborated with in the past, but I'm a massive fan of. So Tom, first of all, welcome and thank you for hanging out with us. Much appreciated, sir.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Sami.
Anytime. By the way, guys, for those of you that are watching, if you would notice over on Keith's screen when he pops up on Mr. Hughes' screen, he's got the hashtag NFLEDU. If you guys want to hashtag that when you're promoting this phantasmagorical live stream on Twitter, which I know all of you will because you all love us so damn much. But no, what we want to do is we wanted to discuss, because it's been in the news all weekend long. It started when the president, when Trump was making a speech in the great state of Alabama, and was talking about NFL players kneeling during the anthem, calling it disrespectful, and then calling some players, or using the term "son of a bitch" when referring to anybody that kneels during the anthem. And of course, it naturally got a rise out of the crowd there, and they started chanting USA and all that other stuff. But this became a huge topic across the airwaves. Pundits and journalists everywhere started filling their airtime with, well, what do we think of NFL players kneeling, and what will their response be, and all this hullabaloo. So I wanted to have a discussion with Keith, with Tom, and with all of you guys that are in the comment section, and wanted to see what we think. And by we, I don't mean just the three of us. I mean all of you guys that are watching as well. What we think about what happened in the NFL today. For those of you that were watching the games, players from pretty much every single team staged some sort of protest, silent protest during the anthem, whether it was taking a knee, whether it was sitting down. In the case of the Pittsburgh Steelers, when they were playing the Chicago Bears here in Chicago, save for one player that's an Army veteran, the rest of the team did not even come out for the national anthem. They either stayed in the tunnel on the way to the field, or they stayed back in the locker room. So clearly, this has had a huge impact, not just on the world of sports, but I think it's brought up a massive conversation when it comes to Americans of all shapes, sizes, colors, creeds, religious beliefs, political beliefs, what have you. So let me first turn it over to the man I've not worked with in the past, Tom RIchey. Tom, Trump made the speech. He basically called out the NFL, called out players, called out owners, saying that any players that don't stand for the anthem or the flag, that are disrespecting the flag, using his words, should be fired or suspended. Now, this is obviously a case of silent protest when it comes to some players. It obviously started off with Colin Kaepernick last year when he was a quarterback for the 49ers. And now it's become a big issue once again. So first off, just your thoughts on what Trump said, how the players responded, and your personal feelings on what has transpired throughout the course of the weekend.
Now, first of all, Sami, what is this professional football you speak of? You know, that's really, I think, one of the first things that really needs to be taken out of this, because I watch my football on Saturday. And so what's interesting is when he goes to Alabama, when Trump goes to Alabama and he says all this stuff about the NFL, you know, none of those people watch the NFL. You know, this was one of those things. The president goes off script. Now I'm just going to tell you, I watched the speech, or at least as much of it as I could tolerate. And, you know, it was obviously just Alabama pandering. I mean, if you watch and, you know, I don't want to be the Trump guy on here tonight. You know, that's not why I appeared on here or anything like that. But if you watch the entire, like, speech, or as much of it as you can stomach, you know, he's like, look, we're about faith, family, and freedom, and the Bible, and all this stuff that he says because he's in Alabama. I mean, it's like the guy's a salesman. He's a panderer. Of course, any successful politician panders to their audience. So if you look at, and I'm not defending the comments or saying that they're presidential, anything like that, but you know, it's like he's there, he's pandering to an audience, he's trying to get this guy that's been loyal to him reelected. You know, what's really the irony here is that he was in Alabama to campaign against Roy Moore, you know, who is basically like the arch conservative, like super religious, you know, guy that, you know, basically the president is down there in Alabama trying to make sure like a guy that's like closer to the center gets elected, which is kind of the irony of this whole situation. So the thing is, I mean, I can respond to some things that are said here, you know, and that sort of thing. But, you know, let's see what Keith has to say, because for me, the professional football thing isn't a very high involvement issue to begin with.
Keith, your thoughts on the game today? I know you're a Buffalo Bills fan. Your boy Shady.
Best day ever. I don't even know what this feels like. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Your boy Shady McCoy was on the field today doing stretches during the National Anthem, while the rest of the team was either taking a knee, sitting down, or just locking arms with each other. Your thoughts on the players' silent protests, sort of in response to what Trump had to say over the weekend?
Well, I'll get to Trump in a second, but just my own personal feelings towards it is I try to be empathetic by nature. So when I hear people say, and McCoy, I personally would never have stretched. I think if you're going to make a statement, make a statement. But I thought that was kind of, you know, flippant in a certain respect. But I, the beholder, I hear a lot of people saying, well, what I think they mean, well, I think they mean what they say what they mean. So if people have a deep feeling that this is what they need to do, and they need to silently protest or kneel or do whatever, whether I agree with it or not, to me, it opens up a door of, well, why are you doing it? Let's have that conversation, as opposed to more of a defensive kind of nationalistic reaction of, well, you're offending me. And sometimes I find it ironic also, because many of the same people who are offended by this silent protest will have their pants on fire if somebody's trying to interfere, you know, some kind of controversial protester who's trying to speak at a college and is being, you know, what I believe, you know, unlawfully shouted down or something like that. So I think that we should all chill for a second and really just, you know, engage in dialogue about what's at the root of this, whether you agree with these people who are kneeling or you don't. Obviously, they're doing it for a reason. And if you think the reason is that they hate their country, I think that you probably should have a conversation with them first. Now, in terms of the president's comments, you know, I can't give the guy a pass. He's not a campaigner. He's not a presidential, you know, nominee. He's the president of the United States. So whether he's speaking to a small group of Girl Scouts on the front lawn or, you know, a rowdy base crowd in Alabama, what he says matters. So whether it's a ruse or not to distract from, you know, other things that are more important that we should be focusing on, like North Korea or healthcare or tax cuts or Russia or whatever it might be. This appears to be a shiny object that we have all ran to. And we support Trump's policies. A lot of times you'll hear them say, and I'm not saying Tom is this guy, but you know, I'd rather not talk about the president and what he said. Obviously, it's not presidential, and let's just move on. But I think all for a second, we should just kind of soak that in, that this is the president of the United States, condemn what he said, and then hopefully have a conversation about what it's at the root of this, which is our culture and being empathetic and listening to other people.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that especially over the weekend following those comments, a lot of people started comparing his speeches between talking about the NFL and then talking about the white supremacists and everything that hit Charlottesville, Virginia, a little while back. And a lot of people were saying, well, how come you weren't this passionate about the white supremacists back in Charlottesville as you are about NFL players taking a knee in silent protest, exercising their First Amendment right? And to me, it just seems like it's almost this weird, I don't know how to say it. He's very much a brand guy, right? I mean, it's very much like what Tom was saying earlier. When he was down in Alabama, that's what he does. He's a panderer. When he shows up to see a specific crowd,
but let me interrupt. But he's talking right to those cameras. When he's talking to those cameras and he's pointing to CNN and he's doing that whole "the media is the enemy" campaign, that's not just to that crowd. But I'm sorry for interrupting. Continue.
No, it's okay. But what I'm saying is that it's an interesting argument that, you know, some people would say that, yeah, like you in front of those cameras when discussing Charlottesville, after he had made the speech condemning white supremacy, condemning the KKK, neo-Nazis, he had that impromptu press conference in the lobby of Trump Tower where he started saying that there's violence on both sides. Not all the people that were white supremacists were there for violence. Some of them were very fine folks. But then when discussing the NFL and discussing players, referring to them as a son of a bitch, referring to them, they should be fired, they should be suspended, owners should, you know what I'm saying? And it just, the argument has come up, or the what's the word I'm looking for? People have noticed that he'll say one thing when it comes to one group of people, but he'll say another thing completely when it comes to another group of people. And earlier today, when it came to this comment that he made about the NFL, a reporter asked him, does this have anything to do with race? And he flat out said, no, this has nothing to do with race. It's all about respect for the flag and respect for the anthem and so forth and so on. When we go back a year ago, when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee during the anthem, and this was around the time that a lot of videos of cops killing African-American men, Eric Garner, so forth and so on, were starting to make themselves more known. That's why Kaepernick took the knee. A lot of people have brought up the idea that, well, if it had been a white player that took a knee first before Cap, would people have said this? Would people have scrutinized and, in a sense, almost villainized that player? Because, you know, in the case of Kaepernick, I mean, Kaepernick, his whole narrative last year, which is why he kind of sucked, to be honest with you, last year when he was playing for the Niners, was his kneeling against the national anthem and so forth and so on. But then people have said, well, if it was a white player that did it first, would he have been villainized as much as Kaepernick, or would people have said, "Oh no, he's a good American exercising his First Amendment rights"? And that's the thing I want to segue into, which is the First Amendment. Both of you are history teachers. Both of you, I hope, are very familiar with the First Amendment, what it has to say. And Tom, would you be so kind as to remind us exactly what the First Amendment of the United States Constitution is and what it says?
Yeah, of course, the First Amendment upholds freedom of expression, speech, press, religion, assembly, petition. I would recommend HipHughes' videos on the Bill of Rights. He's got like the Bill of Rights in 30 seconds or a minute if you need a refresher. Now, the thing is, I don't think that anybody is saying like arrest these people or anything like that. You know, arrest that SOB, you know, draw and quarter him or something like that. And I think that sometimes that this stuff, like when we make it into a constitutional issue, you know, it muddies the waters a little bit, because, you know, Keith mentioned the college campuses, the conservative speakers at college campuses. Well, these college campuses are public universities that receive federal funds. And so these college campuses are supposed to be places by design where any taxpayer you know, can bring somebody in and anything can be said. So these are supposed to be places where people can speak freely. So I think that a clarification is necessary here, that we are talking about a private enterprise. You know, the NFL is a private company. I don't know about Keith. Now, of course, Keith doesn't teach in South Carolina, but if I were to say like, hey, you know what? I'm, you know, as a white guy, I'm going to kneel during the national anthem. Okay. And I'm going to do that publicly. You know, I would be in jeopardy as far as my job, as far as my employment. And I believe that I should be, because, you know, I do have a responsibility as a condition of my employment, as a publicly funded, you know, teacher, and I'm teaching civic virtue and that sort of thing, that, you know, I have an obligation to teach citizenship. And citizenship isn't just making an ass of yourself. I mean, that's not what citizenship is. And, you know, when we think about like, well, the president's supposed to be a role model. Athletes are supposed to be role models, and people do what they do. You know, you had a like Pee Wee football coach that told his kids, like, y'all, you know, kneel during the national anthem. These are 10-year-old kids. They don't know what they're doing, and they're being pressured by an adult to do something that other people consider to be disrespectful. And that's where I think, you know, I often refer to, and I'm kind of ambivalent about the Texas versus Johnson case. I'm not saying that I agree with this, but I think that it's worth mentioning here that Chief Justice William Rehnquist wrote in his dissent in Texas versus Johnson that when someone burns a flag, they don't speak. It is the equivalent of what he called an inarticulate grunt. It's like, what point are you making? Like, what are you doing besides ticking people off? You know, you're not really saying anything. So, you know, Rehnquist said, I don't see a problem. Now, you know, I think that I agree with the majority on that one. So, Keith, I don't think you and I disagree on that, but I think that that opinion, you know, that opinion, which was written by the Chief Justice of the United States and signed on to by other associate justices, at least deserves some consideration. So the thing is, in a situation where somebody is a role model, they are an employee, they are participating in private enterprise, I don't think that the issue here is a constitutional issue as far as what somebody's doing on company time, that it would be within the rights of an NFL owner to say, like, look, get that SOB off the field. Am I saying they should? That's up to them. But that is an issue of something going on within private enterprise. So I think that the constitutional argument lacks relevance here.
I would agree with Tom that it does lack relevance because we're not talking about Congress. We're not talking about legislation. You know, when we come to the flag area, Trump has proposed that, which would go against Texas versus Johnson. And I'll address that really quick. I disagree with Rehnquist when he says that. You know, I don't think that he sees their intent. I don't think that this is a man that might appreciate abstract art. That doesn't mean that abstract art isn't art. So I think that, you know, when we try to interpret intent when someone's doing a symbolic gesture, that sometimes we can be blinded by our own reality, our own experiences. And I think that's a difficult thing to do. I will also say that I agree with Tom that, yeah, they could fire you if they had that well known. Look, if you kneel, you're going to get fired. You work for me. And of course, that's going to lead to, you know, all kinds of brouhaha in terms of their own marketing and splitting the country. It's worth mentioning that even conservative NFL owners like Kraft of the New England Patriots team came out and stood on the side that symbolically kneeling is being a citizen. It is being civic. It is saying something about your country and engaging in, you know, in a sense, freedom of speech in the political arena by doing something. So again,
wait. Now, Keith, just to clarify, what's being done here? That's where I think that you really need to think about that. What is actually being done?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what's being done. What's being done in their mind is they're saying that I have such a problem with how the government treats my race of people or poverty or whatever the issue is, that I feel as though right now I can't stand to honor the country that I need to fight. So whatever, that's what they're saying, and whatever articulate in your view or articulate in your view or constitutional scholars' view, that's their right to do that, especially if the NFL owners and their bosses are saying, you're free to do that on our time. Now, if that's going to piss off some fans and Trump wants to stir, you know, his base of deplorables kind of with that issue, that's one thing. But we could talk about ratings in another section and whether ratings are down because of a lack of competition and kind of the, you know, controversies about violence in the NFL. I don't think it's because Colin Kaepernick.
No, I mean, you know, it's probably because people are watching college football, which is much more interesting.
Well, you know what? I want to talk to you about college football in a second, but to Keith's point and to your point as well, Tom, when I see the players kneeling, and I was having a conversation with somebody about this earlier today when I was at work, there was an older couple that was coming out. I work at a hotel for my day job. There was an older couple that was coming out of the hotel, and I was asking about, like, you know, where they're heading home to. We're going home to Baltimore. Okay. Well, are you guys trying to get home in time for the Ravens game? Oh no, the Ravens are playing in London. We can't see them. But you know what? We're not going to be watching the Ravens anymore. Why? What happened? Oh, you didn't hear what they did? No, what they do? Oh, all those players knelt during the national anthem. I've been a Ravens fan for 15 years, and I have no time for that anymore. And it was in that instant that I noticed like the generation gap come hard, because there were a lot of other older people that were at my place of work that when they would hear about the players kneeling during the anthem or sitting during the anthem or so forth and so on, a lot of them would just shake their head in disbelief, in disgust, and just be like, ugh, okay, whatever, I'm done with these guys. These guys are idiots. Because I think the thing is that a lot of people have this idea that how do you have the right to be pissed off about anything when you're making millions of dollars in a country that's giving you all of this privilege to play a sport? It kind of goes back to the argument of when the Dixie Chicks, a country group, a country trio,
Right.
got shit on by a bunch of their fans because they spoke out against President Bush at the time.
Right.
But at the same time, the counter argument to that, I feel, is that by the players taking a knee, or by sitting, or by staging whatever silent protest that they wanted during the game, I agree with you though, the stretching by Shady was a bit much. But but by doing what they were doing, at no point are they speaking out against the military itself. At no point are they talking out against the troops. At no point are they saying that, oh, I can't stand these people because they're going overseas and doing things that I don't believe.
Right.
At no point they're saying that.
No.
What I feel is happening in this instance is by taking a knee, more importantly, or I should rephrase, by being able to take a knee, by being able to sit down during the national anthem. And it wasn't just the players, by the way. There were some people that were singing the national anthem at some games today. When they finished the anthem, they dropped to one knee. So I think that staging this type of protest, this type of silent protest, I think if anything, it stands to show that, look, we live in a country where we have the right, we have the ability to do something like this. Doesn't mean we're disrespecting the people that are defending our rights to do this. Doesn't mean that we're disrespecting the flag or the country itself. We are standing up against something that we feel is hurting us as a people. It's hurting me as a person. And because of that, I'm going to stage this type of protest. I mean, a lot of the players that when they're on their knees, if you look at the pictures, a lot of them either had their arms linked together, or some of them would still have their hands over their hearts. So the type of protest that I saw was very much, look, it's not me versus the United States. It's me versus an issue that's happening in the United States that doesn't recognize me as a person at this time. So I'm going to stand up against that specific issue by using the biggest platform that I have, which is my sport, which are all these cameras, and say what I have to say without verbally, without using my words, without having to verbally upset anybody.
Wait, but what the hell are they saying? I mean, this is the thing. Like, you know, you say at no point are they disrespecting the troops. But see, people, like, we live in such an increasingly narcissistic culture that people only think about what they're trying to say, not about how it's going to be received and what people hear. And I think that has to be appreciated on some level. You look at the situation in Pittsburgh, where the guy that was a veteran, you know, came out and put his hand on his heart and stood up. That the national anthem is for an overwhelming majority of Americans. It is for the troops. It is for, I mean, you know, you look, I mean, it's celebrating a battle. It's celebrating the flag still being there in the face of, you know, of an enemy. This is something that unifies people. And the thing is, you know, I would say, I mean, you know, they're picking this, you know, this speech, but then again, you know, with silence, it's all about how people are going to hear it. And they take the one thing that in a divisive time like this, until Colin Kaepernick thought, hey, I can draw some attention to myself, that this is something that united people. And they're taking something that unites Americans. And you know what? I'm going to turn this into something divisive in order to make a point that the people I want to hear the point aren't going to hear. It's like when you think about these, you know, these conservative white people that they're trying to reach out to, all it's doing is alienating them, you know. And I've talked to a good many people, and I don't have as strong of opinions on this personally as the people I've talked to. But when you look at this, you know, a lot of people that I talk to, and even younger people here where I live in South Carolina, you know, responded in much the same way people did for you. And this is where I come back to citizenship. Is citizenship just like, you know, doing whatever you want to do and no matter what, or is it accomplishing something? The entire foundation of freedom is built on the idea that people usually do the decent thing. And I think that people here by, you know, taking something that is sacred, you know, it's like on Monty Python, the guy says nothing's sacred when people are just going around saying knee to old women. You know, it's just when people can't even stand during the national anthem, what makes us a country? I mean, what do we have to tie ourselves together in a situation like this where it seems like, you know, we're about to tear each other apart? What good has this done?
I think what's sacred to a lot of those people taking the knee is their friends and their cousins and their brothers that have been shot by the police and what they see in a murderous situation. That's how they see it. So whether or not conservatives receive that point, I don't know if they care as much. And I think that at the end of the day, what I would like America to be about is that rather than getting reactionary, that we get empathetic, that we ask questions. Why? Why are you so angry? Why are you so upset? How can we make this country better? And I would think that if I lived in a community where I saw my friends and relatives, you know, being gunned down, and certainly a lot of that is community violence, we might expect that in a community, but certainly not in the state government, you know, officials that are supposed to protect that community. So whether you agree with them or disagree with them, in their hearts of hearts, they're doing something and saying something. If that's not being received, it seems like that's an opportunity for a conversation rather than conflict.
And then let me ask you this, Tom, because I noticed the T-shirt that you're wearing. You wear Clemson on your heart, right?
Yes, Clemson. Now, Sammy. Clemson. There's a silent P in there. The announcers always get it wrong, but that's how you can tell if somebody's from here or not. Clemson.
Forgive my northern New Jersey accent, so okay. I'll try to resist.
Forgiven.
But okay, but let's look at the college scene for a second. If some of the players on the Tigers, or let's take the state of Alabama.
Not going to happen.
Roll Tide.
Not going to happen.
Any of these dudes, any of these players in the South, or any colleges that are in the North or out West in California or in New England area. If some of these players see what's happening in the NFL right now, and come next Saturday, they say, okay, we're going to stage our own silent protest. We're going to take a knee during the anthem. Now, colleges specifically are a place where a lot of students will start to question everything. You'll start to rationalize things. You'll start to second guess things, because that's the whole nature of college. The whole nature of college is to try to learn at that deeper level, and it's to try to understand at that deeper level. So if college players, like again, let's use Clemson for this instance. Thank you very much. If let's say some of the Tigers came out next week and during the national anthem, not a whole lot of them, let's say 2 or 3 of them to the knee during the anthem. Does that cause severe backlash in a community where college programs, which are heavily sponsored by boosters, heavily sponsored by alumni, does that have a backlash on those programs now because students are taking that stand and saying, hey, this issue that the NFL players are dealing with, it also deals with, I've also dealt with it, and this is how I'm going to protest against it?
Yeah, now I would say, just speaking for Clemson, it would shock me to see a Clemson player, an Alabama player. You know, you imagine Dabo or Nick Saban like allowing that kind of nonsense. I mean, that's the thing, that when it comes to college football, it's like these players, they can have their scholarships yanked. You know, they're looking, you know, these people are here for serious business. They want to play in the NFL. They're not there for theatrics. It's not about them. It's about the team, and it's about the fans who are there. And that's the thing. I mean, I really think, you know, Keith and I agree on some things, but I think there is a difference between citizenship and narcissism. I mean, I sincerely do. And the thing is that college football, I think the structure there now, depending on the college community, But at Clemson, you know, one of our games is Military Appreciation Day. I mean, I just don't see that happening. I think the coaches have a much tighter grip. Whereas when you look at the NFL, these players are commodities. And so when it comes down to it, if the player who is a multi-million-dollar commodity wants to kneel, then they're just going to let that person kneel. They're going to defend them because you've got a players union and all of that other stuff. I mean, this isn't those owners and people, the commissioner, they're not being like, you know, this isn't them stating what they really believe. They're saying what they need to say to satisfy these people who are commodities and who make money for them. And so the players union, I mean, they would, you know, I mean, that's the thing. I think that you look at a lot of internal stuff in the NFL. Now, some colleges may allow that to happen. I just don't really see that happening, you know, at, you know, Clemson or Bama or somewhere like that. And, you know, I think there's a culture difference there. Now, you know, the thing is, if they want to do something as a student, then that's why I say, like, if you want to do something, you know, then go and do it, you know, go and actually, you know, today, here's the thing. Here's the thing, and just to expand this, we live in a culture, like when I ask my students to write down a word that represents the idea of America, one of them wrote destruction. And when I thought about this, there's this culture of destruction, like where 200 years ago, they would burn a living person in effigy to make a point and hopefully, like, you know, influence the way that that person was going to act. Now people go and protest statues, dead people. And it's this idea that by destroying something that, you know, we're going to result in constructive change, whereas constructive change, you know, starts with creating things and engaging things. And that's where I just think that, you know, this is not illegal, what they're doing. I don't think anybody should be arrested. If the owners, you know, and the coaches are allowing them to do it, then whatever. But I feel like it's misguided because I don't think that it's resulting in the type of constructive change that people are claiming to want. And you look at the people kneeling today. Like, they weren't kneeling last week. So what? They're kneeling just because of Trump to show solidarity. And so now, like, you know, their teammates are more important than their country. I mean, that's the thing. It's just we really have gotten to the point where what is it that we really share as Americans?
They're saying their right to constitutionally protest and not be threatened is sacred. And it's interesting to note that many of the white players who didn't kneel but locked arms and put their hands on those who kneeled, Trump specifically stated that he didn't think that was offensive. He didn't say the white players, but it was basically all white players who did that. And, you know, not to make a judgment on you, Tom, but I find it very judgmental when you say these people are being narcissists. Stephen Curry is not a narcissist. He's a man who gives back to his community, who is a role model, who loves his country, and this is his way of expressing a protest. And you're receiving it as something that is, I guess, in a narcissistic manner. I will agree with you that that can't be the end point. I agree with you. It can't be the end point. There needs to be a follow-up. There needs to be creative action. I agree with that. But to say they're being narcissistic because they're taking a knee and that's destroying something, I think that might be misread.
Well, but what about now? Did Steph Curry kneel during an anthem at some point, or I thought that was just something between him and Trump?
That was with him and Trump, but it was basically over this issue about having, you know, that constitutional right to do that. Yeah, I'm just going to call you on the straw man there. Like, I don't have a problem. You know, it's like if he wants to say, hey, I disagree with what the president did and I'm not going to the White House as a form of protest and I'm saying this on my own, not on company time. Yeah, you and I agree 100% on that. So you don't think I could find one of those people who kneels and show you them that they're a community activist and involved and a citizen and love, you know, their family and their role models?
Maybe they are, but I do think that when you take something, and this all started now, of course, you know, if somebody's kneeling today because they're trying to defend somebody else, something like that, but it's like Colin Kaepernick was a failing quarterback and he found a way to make it about him. And that's really been his whole.
I so disagree. You really think that he just made this shit up in order to get attention? I think that's narcissistic. I mean, how can you see in his soul? How do you know his hearts of hearts?
I don't necessarily, but I know the guy was wearing picky socks at a practice. You know, I mean, the man has mocked police. You know, he's shown solidarity with, you know, leftist, you know, dictatorial governments and stuff like that. I mean, this guy is not like, you know, he goes off the field and he's just this model American. But here's the thing, though. It's just, are there more
constructive? What a model American is. I want to make sure I'm living up. I don't want to get something not checked off, you know? I'm worried. I'm worried.
Make sure you have your Constitution framed in gold, Keith.
What's that?
Make sure you have your Constitution framed in gold.
I have that shit in my pocket.
Good. But I mean, I think, and I want to start moving the conversation a bit more towards more of a historical topic, just in terms of, because, you know, we the two of you are historians and I'm doing my damnedest to try to be one. But when it comes to the anthem itself, the Star-Spangled Banner, Cap, when he was kneeling last year, when he first started kneeling and he started talking about, I'm not going to kneel to a Star-Spangled Banner that is to a national anthem that is racist. And in saying that, he was referring to the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner, which is no longer a part of the song. I believe that was taken out by around the time of World War II, if I'm not mistaken. But for those of you guys that don't know the third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner that Francis Scott Key wrote, I have it right here. I can read it to you really quickly. It says, and where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps pollution. No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. That is the third verse that was written by Francis Scott Key, which he wrote during the Battle of Fort McHenry in Baltimore during the War of 1812. Let's discuss this real quick. There's been a lot of discussion, again, following Cap's kneel last year, and he brought up the fact that the Star-Spangled Banner is a racist song because it refers to slaves, because it refers to those that are hirelings, which are people that were hired by the British Army to fight on their side, both white and black. Most notably, there's an article from theroot.com that's making headway on the internet again, saying that the national anthem is a song that has that is about slavery. And then people started looking into Francis Scott Key's history, which showed him as a prominent lawyer and someone that also owned slaves, someone that wasn't against the abolition of slavery. So let's dive into this particular topic real quick. When it comes to the Star-Spangled Banner, based on its history, yes, that third verse is no longer in the song, and now we just resort to just singing the first verse that everybody knows. Hopefully everybody knows really well. Keith, let's start with you. When it comes to the Star-Spangled Banner, there are arguments that are saying that the song is a racist song, and then there are those that say it's not. So where would you stand on this specifically? Do you fall in that? I don't see.
Well, I've never been a great fan of the Star-Spangled Banner myself. Not because of that, and I found out about that racist part later in life. I like America the Beautiful better. I thought that would be a better choice, but it is what it is, right? And personally, and this is all about perspectivism in a sense, because I'm white, you know, if you haven't noticed. So my experiences and my history and my genealogy and how I see the world and my interactions, you know, part of it is filtered through my whiteness. I've learned this a long time ago, and my maleness. And that doesn't mean that that's what I am, but it does mean that it serves me certain limitations about how I can see other people's worlds. So I'm always hesitant when people have that view that I might disagree with. And I might say, yeah, but we took that verse out and it's about the sacrifice of militant, you know, trying to show my worldview. So I think it's always a good thing if it can promote debate and dialogue and understanding and empathy. And that doesn't always happen because a lot of us in this country are reactionary and we grab our flag and you don't see the world how I see the world, so how dare you? And you know, we can blame whoever. You started it because you knew how I would react, or it's your fault because you're reacting in such a barbaric, you know, Neanderthalic kind of way. But either way, I think that discussion is always good. And I think that we should always be careful about being judgmental in terms of where people's hearts are and where they live and why they're saying the things they say. You don't know their history. You don't know their family. You don't know their experiences. So if you want to have a conversation with that person and then come to some kind of judgmental call, that's great. But until that happens, I think discussion is always the higher road.
Dom?
All right. Now, as far as the Star Spangled Banner itself, you know, and there are things such as, you know, we can say, oh, this is what it was. And like you said, they've taken that verse out. Like I'm looking at the French National Anthem where it says, listen to the sound in the fields, the howling of these fearsome soldiers. They are coming into our midst to cut the throats of your sons and consorts.
Yeah, I don't like that one either. Yeah.
Now the French just play it. They don't sing it anymore, you know? So it's like, the thing is, okay, this doesn't really reflect the French spirit. And so they decide, you know, we're going to play it, but it's something that, you know, brings out pride in French people. And I think when it comes down to it, the history of the national anthem is less relevant than how people view it. That when it comes down to it, I mean, if you think of that as a text, you know, in a postmodern sense, it's how people view it. So if somebody doesn't stand during the national anthem, you know, a lot of people see that and they think this person's disrespecting the troops. And, you know, and like I said, I'm not necessarily like, you know, thinking that, you know, I'm just saying that I think that, I mean, my perspective is that this is ill-advised. It really doesn't matter to me a great deal one way or the other. You know, I just think that if somebody's going to do something, they should do it passionately. Or they should do it in a way that's going to impact something. You know, when Keith talks about empathy, I'm thinking about, well, what about empathy for people whose sons have died for this country? You know, and that these people feel like that their flag is being disrespected. Where's the empathy there? And, you know, we talk about that and it's like, you don't know what these people have been through. And you know what? I don't. Okay. Now, the thing is, and I, you know, I'm not saying institutional racism doesn't exist. I taught in an inner city school for a year. I know that it does. But at the same time, I mean, I am a cisgendered white male who loves women, but I will never have the privilege that Colin Kaepernick has. You know, I mean, the thing is, when it comes down to it, I think that that argument that people have, that when it comes down to it, that these people do have, they sit at the pinnacle of American privilege, because the most important privilege is money privilege.
On the east side at 3 a.m.? Does it matter?
What's that?
Does it matter if they're being pulled over at 3 a.m., you know, in a shady neighborhood by a cop who's a little, you know, trigger happy? It doesn't matter. You know, your color of your skin is your color of your skin. So when you walk into a store and you're being followed by security, or you're pulled over 10 times because you drive a nice car in a decent neighborhood. And I have a friend who's actually been pulled over like 23 times in the last couple of years because he's black. That's the point blank. That's why he does it. And if that's your existence, then that frames how you see the world. And that's what I'm talking about. That we have to be careful. We don't understand how they see the world. And sure, we can be mad at them because they don't understand how we see the world. But it's about being empathetic to have that conversation.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, Keith, I think there's more agreement than, you know, disagreement. This kind of forum is made to kind of go back and forth. But at the same time, you know, I mean, I do think, yes, a black person is more likely to get pulled over and, you know, treated a certain way by a police officer than a white person. I also believe that, you know, most police officers out there, nearly all of them, are out there doing their job. But at the same time, I mean, I do think there is institutional racism. I think that needs to be challenged. But, you know, these players could do a lot more by reaching in their pocketbooks and providing for education for young people and that sort of thing than they are by this, which is just basically all this is doing is confirming people's bias. Like, you notice, like, how many people's opinions have been changed by this. And I think that's where, if we're thinking about if this were an investment, it would be a bad investment, because, you know, you don't really see the payoff here as far as how this is going to translate to policy.
Then let's turn this back and really blame whose fault this is. It's the president's fault that he wanted to shine a light on this. He's supposed to be the president of the United States of America. His job, and one of them I believe should be on the resume, is to unite the country. And when you have this past, and Sami mentioned it before about how angry he got, you know, about this compared to how not that angry he got about white supremacists in Charlottesville. Why is he doing this? Is it possible that we just need to ignore the president of the United States? And if so, what does that do, or what damage does that do to the republic and to the actual institution of the office of the president of the United States? That's why I'm scared to do it. I don't want to ignore the president of the United States because he is the president of the United States.
Well, I mean, I think that when you look at this, like how many times did, Barack Obama really try to be a president for all Americans? And I'm not trying to implicate President Obama.
When this happened and Colin Kaepernick went out, he gave a speech that totally said both sides. Totally said both sides.
Right. No, I'm not talking about this issue, though. It's just what I'm saying is that Trump did not create the conditions that resulted in his election. He exploited and benefited from these conditions. And the thing is that Trump did not divide the country. Trump takes advantage of a divided country. All politicians take advantage of a divided country.
I disagree, Tom.
The only time President Obama visited my state while he was president, to the best of my knowledge, was after the Charleston shooting, which he received political capital for doing. I mean, the thing is, it made
he went to be with the people who died in their families. That's what the president.
But at what other point did he ever visit my deep red state? I mean, that's a serious.
What is he supposed to do?
The whole idea that Donald Trump has been the first person to not be a president of all Americans is ridiculous. Like, presidents are presidents. I don't like this.
It's not the same.
Presidents are presidents of the people that elected them, and that's how they've all acted in recent memory.
No, it's not the same. It's not the same. It's just not the same. I understand what politicians do, especially when elections come closer, but not in the beginning of their term. He has taken every chance to divide and conquer. Every single chance he gets, create chaos, be weird and outlandish, divide and divide. And whether President Obama might have done that on occasion, I really believe that he went out of his way to give speeches about uniting. At least you gave it lip service. President Trump, he's not Nixon or Reagan or Clinton or any of them. So I just don't even feel comfortable putting them in the same arena.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you, Keith, I mean, I mentioned that I didn't watch the entire speech. I mean, at a certain point, I was like, man, he is just like pandering to Alabama, telling them what he thinks they want to hear and what maybe they do want to hear. But as somebody that is from the South, it was a little bit, I mean, if I can be honest, I mean, his speech was a little bit offensive to me because really the way that he spoke to these people, it made me feel like he thought that they were just a bunch of like idiots who can be manipulated.
Don't you think that part of it is less political pandering and more of a personality flaw, his own narcissism and ego, that they just need to do this because it feeds him and makes him happy, and it makes it for a better White House climate. I tend to think that this is less about pandering to the base and securing the base. They're not going anywhere. And it's more just a personality thing.
Well, I mean, and I don't necessarily disagree with you on that, Keith. And the thing is that, this is where, Keith and I actually, I mean, we typically vote differently, but I think we got a lot in common as far as, it's like I voted for Trump, but I realized that there are things like, just the sort of pandering that you see there, it made me uncomfortable. Okay. So as far as, like I said earlier, if somebody wants me to defend the president saying what he said and that type of speech that's really just, at this audience, I don't like it. Now, the thing is, I think that he may have an objective here because when it comes down to it, and President Obama used these same tactics, and I don't fault him for those. But when you go after the base, it's like to get reelected, his campaign strategy was to get the base to turn out. Even if it's going to alienate, you had about, those 7 or 8 million voters that voted in 2008, but didn't vote in 2012 because they were independent voters who were alienated. And the thing is that the politicians are seeing that taking advantage of a divisive culture is working for them. And
I'm not sure. How did Obama satisfy his base? Give me a policy that satisfied what you say is his base, which I'm assuming is this kind of urban young demographic. When I see policies like, you say Obamacare, that's not like leftists do not like Obamacare. Many of his policies on Wall Street and the stock market for leftists and people who you would consider to be the traditional Democratic base weren't very happy with Obama. many of them thought that he was too centric. Correct?
Right, but I mean, as far as the campaign rhetoric, which that's all this was, we can talk about calendar dates, but this was a campaign appearance. There's an election in Alabama. He wants a guy to win. He did this, and so in terms of the campaign rhetoric,
what are the other rallies?
As long as the country,
what are the other rallies for? What's he campaigning for when he went to West Virginia or whatever the other week or something? Was he there for?
Well, the thing is how many trips did President Obama make to California
He didn't make a campaign. He didn't do a campaign for 2012.
But it was fundraising on taxpayer money. I mean, the thing is, I think the idea that all these politicians have been so virtuous and then here comes Trump, I don't think it paints the whole picture. The thing is, the president I like to look to is James Monroe, okay, which James Monroe, when he was elected, he decided to go to the states that didn't vote for him. You know, he did a goodwill tour of New England. And he said, look, I mean, that's somebody who wants to be the president of all Americans. And, we don't have that anymore. This idea that somebody wants their president, they cease to be a member of their political party. You and I have both taught AP government.
I understand.
One of the president's jobs is his off the books jobs as head of party. And
I understand.
Until we get away from that, until the culture demands something different, I think we're going to see more of this. I don't think that Trump's going to be a blip. I think that we have seen a change. I think that we've seen a change in our politics, and I think that it's been evolutionary.
I just don't think the comparison is fair. When you're talking about all those other presidents and how they pandered, and they all did, I agree with you. But I think if you look at them as if that's a bad thing, that all of those other presidents were being Gargamel from the Smurfs. Trump is not being Gargamel. Like, he's being like, I don't know, like the con guy from Superman 2 or something. It's not the same. YouTube, it's not the.
You're talking about Zod?
We have to wrap this up soon. So maybe, Sammy, if I want to throw it to you to kind of wrap this up and we could say something. I have stuff to do.
I want to say, kneel before Zod. I got a Superman tattoo right here.
Zod, it's Zod.
The villain's name from Superman 2, you goddamn heathen. All right, listen. Let me just say this has been an incredibly spirited conversation. And honestly, look, me being not the history teacher in this group, it was an honor for me. Yeah, ZOD, played by Michael Shannon in Man of Steel, which was this underrated yet slightly overrated performance. Regardless. For me to sit back and to listen to the two of you guys debate and discuss has been a treat for me, because I'm hoping that I can bump up my debate skills to the point where I can join your ranks as history teacher. Hopefully,
I have something to say.
Yes,
if you're not subscribed to Sammy's channel, you should be doing that right about now, son.
Yes.
Go down in the description, and certainly you're probably already subscribed to Tom, but if not, that's in the description. If I'm on another channel, everything's in the description.
Every channel is in the description. All you guys, I highly recommend everyone go subscribe to HipHughes History, to Tom RIchey, to myself, if you've not done so yet. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, I have to say this has been an incredibly spirited debate. I can't thank the two of you for showing up and making my my editing job a lot easier for this Tuesday's episode. Good looking out. I don't have to write a script. The script has already been written. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us, for leaving your comments in the comment section, for getting involved in the conversation with us, guys. I would love to do this again with the two of you guys. If y'all want, I'd be more than happy to start a podcast, call it the First Amendment, and then go to town on topics of the day. And bring.
I will have my people call your people.
Yes.
And I will say this as well. As spirited as I disagree with Mr. RIchey, I love my brother from a Southern mother.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Tom?
Yes, and likewise. I'm always glad to chat with Keith. We've had, and it's great. We've both got intense personalities, which I think that kind of, that comes with the territory for the YouTube thing. But anyway, yeah, just love this guy. He gave me my start in this whole thing. So yeah, Sammy, thanks a lot for having us on here this evening.
Absolutely. I thank the two of you again for hanging out with us. Much appreciated. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are all done for the evening. The Raiders and the Redskins are playing right now if y'all want to go watch. The Raiders sat down and the Redskins locked arms. So there, East Coast, West Coast bias. Y'all tell me who you guys want to hang out with for the evening. Derek Carr's looking awesome, but my fantasy team is on fire right now because of that quarterback. That man can sling a ball like nobody's business. Who's going to the NFL from Clemson next year? Tom?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, got a younger team, but you know, we'll see. Once they leave, I don't really follow him anymore, you know?
That's so fucked up. You got to pay attention to your alumni, kid. What are you doing?
This is where I try to insert kind of male talk, like I know what the hell I would be talking about when it comes to sports. Go Bills. All right, I'm going to end this, guys, right now because I'm going to say it because I say it at the end of everything I've ever done in my whole life. Where attention goes, energy flows. We'll see you folks next time you press any of our buttons. All right, good night, my friends.